What began as a routine promotional appearance quickly spiraled into late-night mayhem when Mark Wahlberg confronted Jimmy Kimmel over a jab at his past. What followed was a fiery exchange that ended with security stepping in and escorting the A-list star off the set. The audience had settled in expecting another standard episode of Jimmy Kimmel Live. Mark Wahlberg had been a familiar face on the show for years, usually chatting about his latest blockbuster or sharing stories from his Boston upbringing in a relaxed, humorous tone. But from the moment Wahlberg stepped onto the stage, the atmosphere felt off. Kimmel opened with his usual monologue, yet something in his energy was noticeably more aggressive. When he introduced Wahlberg, there was a sharpness in his voice that longtime viewers might have picked up on. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mark Wahlberg. He's here to talk about his new film, and hopefully not rough anyone up. Backstage, Kimmel quipped. The crowd chuckled, but Wahlberg's smile faded for just a second as he took his seat. He'd grown used to jokes about his checkered past, but there was something in Kimmel's delivery that didn't sit right. Still, Wahlberg kept his cool, slipping into the guest chair like a seasoned pro. "So, Mark," Kimmel started, reclining casually, "another action movie? You're 53 now. When do you plan on retiring from pretending to be tough?" Wahlberg's jaw clenched ever so slightly. "Well, Jimmy, as long as audiences are drawn to genuine stories about real people overcoming real struggles, I think there will always be room for films like that." "Authentic stories?" Kimmel repeated mockingly. "Right, because nothing screams real like a millionaire actor from Dorchester acting like he's still connected to the streets." A hush fell over the studio. Even the band members looked at each other, uneasy. This wasn't harmless teasing. There was bite in Kimmel's voice, something personal. Wahlberg leaned forward, his voice calm but clear. "I've never tried to be anyone I'm not. Jimmy, I've spoken publicly about my past, about the mistakes I made, and how I've worked to make them right." "Oh, sure, the whole redemption arc," Kimmel interrupted, clearly poking. "The bear. Tell me, Mark, do you think any of your victims ever sit down to watch your movies and think, 'Hey, great, the guy who permanently damaged my eyesight is now a multimillionaire'?" The reference to Wahlberg's 1988 assault. Conviction hit like a punch to the gut. In the green room, Wahlberg's publicist immediately grabbed her phone. Kimmel had crossed a serious line, the kind rarely crossed in the entertainment industry. "Jimmy, that's wildly inappropriate," Wahlberg said, his Boston accent creeping in as his patience thinned. "I was 16. I did my time. I took responsibility. I made direct amends, and I've spent over 3 decades working to be a better man." Kimmel didn't let up. "Have you, though? Because from where I'm sitting, it just looks like you got rich and famous, and people decided to stop caring about what you did." The room was completely silent. The camera crew looked toward the control booth, waiting for direction. "Cut to commercial or let it roll?" Wahlberg's hands trembled slightly, not from nerves, but from the sheer effort it took to keep himself composed. "You know what, Jimmy?" Wahlberg rose slowly, voice low and controlled. "I came here tonight to promote a film that employs hundreds of people, supports families, and tells a powerful story about second chances. But instead, you're dredging up the darkest chapter of my life, for laughs." For a moment, Kimmel looked like he realized he had gone too far, but pride wouldn't let him back down. "Hey, I'm just asking what everyone else is thinking. Isn't that what journalism is all about?" Wahlberg's tone hardened. "Journalism? This isn't journalism, Jimmy. This is character assassination. And for someone who's made a name mocking people who can't defend themselves, it's pretty hypocritical." The tension in the studio was now impossible to ignore. Audience members squirmed in their seats, unsure whether they were witnessing a scripted moment or a full-on breakdown in professionalism. Security staff had already begun edging toward the stage. Kimmel's face turned crimson. He'd faced difficult guests before, but Wahlberg's simmering fury was different. He wasn't loud, he wasn't unruly, but the intensity in his stare was far more unsettling. "Mark, maybe we should take a break," Kimmel suggested, finally realizing things were spiraling beyond his control. "No, Jimmy," Wahlberg replied without flinching. "Let's not take a break. Let's finish this conversation." The studio lights seemed almost blinding as the two men locked eyes. Kimmel's usual smug confidence began to crumble. Still, he refused to backpedal. He glanced at his cue cards, then back up at Wahlberg, who was still standing, looming over the host. "Look, Mark," Kimmel tried again, "maybe you're just being a little too sensitive. This is comedy. This is what we do. If you can't laugh at your past, maybe Hollywood's not for you." The silence was suffocating. Gasps echoed through the room. Even Kimmel's own bandleader looked away, shaking his head. Everyone knew. The host had just made a critical mistake. Wahlberg's expression turned ice cold. "Sensitive, Jimmy? Let me explain something about sensitivity. I was just a 16-year-old kid coming from a broken home, hooked on cocaine, and full of rage at the world. I hurt people, and that's a burden I carry with me every single day. But one thing I won't carry is the judgment of some privileged comedian from Brooklyn, sitting behind a desk that costs more than most people's homes, telling me how to feel about my past." That comment struck a nerve. Kimmel's face flushed and his tone grew defensive. "Privileged? I worked my way up from the bottom just like you say you did." Wahlberg took a step forward, his voice louder now. "Say I did? Jimmy, I never said it. I lived it. While you were making prank calls on the radio, I was trying to avoid getting shot on my way to school. While you were cozying up to celebrities for interviews, I was on construction sites at 4 in the morning, saving to pay for acting lessons." The audience sat frozen, the air charged with tension. This wasn't the usual late-night chatter or playful teasing. This was something raw, something painful, two men airing deep wounds on live television. Kimmel attempted to lighten the mood, letting out a nervous laugh, but it landed flat. "Mark, come on, you're taking this way too seriously." "We're entertainers, we both understand how this works." Wahlberg leaned in, his voice dropping to a simmer. "No, Jimmy, to me this isn't a game. My past isn't your punchline. The people I hurt, those were real lives, not setups for your monologue, and everything I've done to make amends? That's not some material for a cheap laugh." Beads of sweat formed on Kimmel's forehead under the harsh studio lights. Hiss. Writing team signaled desperately from the booth, but he was locked in this moment with no easy way out. "You want to know what's funny?" Wahlberg asked, the passion returning to his voice. "You sit here night after night cracking jokes about other people's lives, their pain, their screw-ups. But when's the last time you put yourself on the line? When have you ever risked something real?" Cornered and emotional, Kimmel blurted out what would prove to be a terrible mistake. "At least I didn't blind anyone in a racially motivated assault." The words hit like a hammer. The studio went still. The reference to Wahlberg's teenage crime wasn't just inappropriate, it was vicious. Even the camera crew froze, unsure. Wahlberg shook his head, his expression shifting from anger to something colder disgust. "I never said I was better than anyone. But I do understand the difference between taking responsibility and exploiting someone else's pain. I know what it means to own my past instead of profiting from someone else's mistakes." Kimmel lost whatever composure he had left. "Don't give me a lecture, Mark. You're just an actor. You memorize scripts and pretend to be someone else. Don't talk to me about what's real." That final insult was too much. Several audience members stood and began heading for the exits, visibly offended. The mood had completely shifted. What began as late-night entertainment had descended into something far more personal, bitter and disturbing. "You know what, Jimmy?" Wahlberg said, his voice calm again, eerily calm. "You're right about one thing." He took a breath. His eyes locked on the host. "I do read lines other people write, but at least when I step into a role, I'm just being real with you. You've worn that TV persona for so long that you've lost sight of who you actually are behind the layers of makeup and rehearsed punchlines." Kimmel's face flushed a deep red, the veins on his forehead pulsing with tension. "Get out, Mark. Just leave." "Oh, now you want me gone?" Wahlberg's voice climbed, sharp with disbelief. "After setting me up with personal jabs? After trying to break me down in front of millions? Now you're tossing me aside like some random guy who accidentally walked onto your stage?" The security team slowly edged closer, circling the stage with caution. They were ready in case things got out of hand. But Wahlberg showed no signs of violence. His fury was in his words. And that somehow made it hit even harder. "You invited me here?" "Jimmy," he continued, his voice ringing through the stunned silence of the studio. "You asked me to come on, to talk about my work, to give your viewers something worth watching. And instead of doing your job as a respectful host, you tried to tear me down for a laugh." Kimmel's breathing was heavy, clearly rattled by the storm he had stirred. "I was just being a tough interviewer." "That's what we do, ask hard questions." Wahlberg let out a bitter laugh. "Tough questions are about my career, my choices, my craft. What you did wasn't tough, it was personal. It was petty, you didn't ask questions. You threw accusations." The room was silent, so silent every word echoed like thunder. Even the house band had stopped. The background music vanished. All that remained was the sound of a very real, very raw exchange that should have never happened on camera. "And do you want to know the saddest part, Jimmy?" Wahlberg's voice softened to a near whisper, but the weight of his words filled the room. "You actually have talent. You can be funny, you can be charismatic, you've got the tools. But somewhere along the way, you decided cruelty was easier. Then creativity, that one hit differently." Kimmel seemed shaken. His eyes glistened, though no one could tell if it was rage or regret. "Don't try to psychoanalyze me," Kimmel said, his voice cracking. "You don't know a damn thing about what I've been through." "You're right, I don't," Wahlberg replied, "because you hide. Behind jokes, sarcasm, that fake smile, you never let people see the real you. I've owned my flaws. I've admitted when I screwed up. I've tried to make things right." The tension now was unbearable. This wasn't a late-night interview, it had become a personal reckoning. Two public figures peeling back their images, exposing vulnerability and wounds for all to see. Kimmel suddenly slammed his palm onto the desk. The thud echoed like a warning shot. "That's enough. This is my show, my stage, my cameras, my crowd. You don't get to come here and tell me how to do my job." Wahlberg stepped back, not scared, just taken aback by the outburst. "There it is," he said quietly. "The real Jimmy Kimmel. Not the jokester, not the host, just an insecure bully who can't stand being held accountable." The words lingered. Heavy and final, Kimmel's face lost all color. He looked around the room, searching the faces of his crew, his band, anyone who might come to his defense. But what met his eyes were cold stares and visible discomfort. "Want to know what's truly pathetic, Jimmy?" Wahlberg went on, his voice now calm but deeply firm. "I came here ready to be open. Ready to talk about my past, my failures, how I've hurt people, and how I've tried to grow. That's what honest people do. They face their mess and try to do better." Kimmel tried to respond, but no words came. He looked defeated. The quick comebacks he was known for were nowhere to be found. The audience watched, stunned and silent, many clearly siding with Wahlberg. "But you," Wahlberg pointed directly at him, "you saw my openness as weakness. You saw honesty as a target. You took the most painful part of my life and tried to turn it into a punchline." The security staff still stood by, but it was clear now no one needed restraining. The real damage had already been done. This wasn't about fists. It was about pride, credibility, and the collapse of a public persona. And the most twisted part of all? Wahlberg's voice rose once more, not with rage, but with deep disappointment. "Your viewers deserve more than this. They came to laugh, to enjoy the evening, to escape their problems for a little while. And instead, you turned this into a masterclass in how not to treat a guest. At first, it was just a few audience members clapping. Then more, until a full wave of applause filled the studio, not for the drama, but for Wahlberg's strength, his refusal to be disrespected. Kimmel finally managed to speak, but it was barely more than a whisper. "Mark, I think maybe things just got out of hand." "No, Jimmy," Wahlberg said, shaking his head with conviction. "You're the one who went too far. I tried to stay professional. I tried steering the conversation in a better direction. I gave you more than one chance to just be decent. But every single time you chose to dig deeper into cruelty, the Host glanced toward his producers, clearly looking for help, but their faces showed the same disgust as everyone else in the room. One of them was already on the phone, probably with network execs watching the meltdown unfold live. "I think we're done here," Wahlberg said, unclipping the small mic from his shirt. "This isn't the kind of show I want my name tied to, and you're not the kind of person I want to work with." Kimmel, scrambling, made one last attempt. "Mark, wait, can't we just—" But Wahlberg shut him down cold.